Hello, I am Miss Justina. I am the Assistant Youth Services Supervisor at the Altoona Area Public Library, and this is Book Look. So a book look is a chance for you to see some of our new books that have just arrived and for us to showcase some of our favorite new titles. So I'm going to introduce you to some of our new books in order from the easiest to read, meaning things like board books and things that are for younger children, to the most challenging. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start off with our first book here. The easiest book in our series is a board book. Board books are designed to have thicker pages so that they're a little bit more sturdy for little ones. And this new book is called Whose Bones? This is a fun little book that's kind of scientific and kind of a bit of a guessing game at the same time. Each page shows you a skeleton and has some information about the animal and some clues to kind of make it a guessing game to figure out what animal the skeleton came from. And then once you figure that out, or if you just want to look, you flip open the flap and it will show you the animal that the skeleton is from, along with some more information about that animal. And because of all the different guessing game parts of this book, this is very suitable for everyone from absolute little littles up through 4, 5, 6-year-olds. And it's a lot of fun to read too, because you can kind of make a game out of it. Next up, we have some new beginner readers that are in. Beginner readers are thin books that are specifically designed for emerging readers or new readers. They're a little bit shorter and easier to read, so to help encourage children who are just starting to read. And we get beginner readers in a variety of levels, everywhere from a pre-level 1 to a level 1 to level 2s. And those levels vary a little bit depending on the type of book and who published that book, but basically the pre-level is good for preschool to kindergarten. First level is like kindergarten to first grade. Level 2 is first grade to second grade, and so on. And these beginner readers are not only fantastic because they are thin and easy for kids to read, but they also cover a wide variety of topics. Everything from new Disney characters to Lego Star Wars to Pokemon to even some non-fiction, so that your kids can have a variety of different things that they can read on their own. After the beginner readers, next we come to our picture books. Picture books, or easy readers as we like to call them, are typically books that are designed to be read to your children more so than for them to read on their own. But lots of them do contain very simple sentences or very simple pages or paragraphs, so it wouldn't be too difficult for a child to read these on their own, maybe down the road. And we're going to start off with a holiday-themed picture book for this one. This holiday is obviously past, but we get new books in all year round so that it's ready for your next year, or if you just maybe want to read it any time of the year. And this new book that we have in is actually a New Year's based book, and as you might be able to tell from the title, it is a bilingual book. So this book actually contains phrases in both English and in Spanish, mostly in English, and then there are just some Spanish phrases and words that are thrown in throughout the story. In fact, there is one point where there's actually some dialogue that is in Spanish, and then it is paraphrased later in English. So you'll still know what the book is about and what it's saying, even if you only know one of those languages. But this is a fantastic way to introduce a second language or to help have a little bit more of that language in your reading. This book is also, of course, about a girl named Ava Gabriella. It's a fun little story about how she is nervous to see all of her family members at her New Year celebration, but after she spends some time in the kitchen making a traditional New Year's treat for her family, she overcomes her nervousness and is able to have a very fun New Year's. Next on our list of picture books or easy reader books, we have a new book titled Alligator. And this is a fun little story about a boy who loves to take walks in the woods and one day meets an alligator. And this alligator, being hungry and lonely and having not eaten anyone yet, decides to become best friends with the boy. The town folk isn't exactly thrilled, but the two of them are able to have an unlikely but charming friendship. And this book is filled with these absolutely beautiful illustrations in a really, really pretty art style that is very engaging. There are lots of bright colors, lots of very interesting art style here that is sure to make a fantastic read. Our next easy reader title here is called A Fort on the Moon. And this is a story that's a bit more about brotherhood than about a fort or about the moon. So this book follows the story of two brothers, Fox Wilder and his little brother. Fox knows all about the moon, and in fact, the two brothers often build a spaceship they call the White Dolphin out of odds and ends around their house and fly it to the moon. Their dad's an engineer, so he's taught them all sorts of different ways to build forts and to build spaceships, and this is a fantastic story for anyone who's ever made believe and then pretended it was real. Our next title in our easy readers or picture book section is called Star-Crossed. I adore this book. I actually am one of the ones who picked this out to order. I think this is a brilliant book. Not only is it beautiful, but it tells a very interesting story that is sort of true. So this story follows two best friends, a girl who studies the star and a boy who is made out of stars. He's actually a constellation. And they go through time becoming best friends, and eventually they both get a chance to make a wish. And they both wish to be where the other one is. Fortunately, since they both made the exact same wish, they end up actually just trading places, with the girl becoming a constellation and the constellation becoming a human, and then giving them the opportunity to study each other in different ways. Their friendship persists, and they're able to stay friends forever, but they're always just a bit apart. They never end up being able to be in the same place at the same time. And the reason for this is that this story is based loosely on a true story. This story is actually based on the constellation of Eridanus and its brightest star, Asimar. Asimar is what is known as a binary star, which means it appears as just a single light in the sky. But when viewed through a very, very powerful telescope, we actually discover that it is two stars that are trapped in a gravitational bond to each other, and will always just spin very, very close to each other without ever touching. And the two children in this book are based off those twin gravitationally bound stars of the constellation Eridanus. This is also a very beautiful book that has been made with watercolors, digital effects, salt, pastels, all sorts of things, and the art is just gorgeous. I mean, I wish I could cut out the pages and hang them up as art. I absolutely love the depictions of all the stars and the night sky, because you can really see all those blues and purples, and it's just a very, very visually beautiful book. Next up in our picture book or easy reader category, we have Every Child a Song. And at first glance, this book is a gentle and almost lyrical reminder that everyone is unique and special in their own way. There's a very soft color palette throughout, so it's a nice book to read before bedtime. It's not a loud, wake you up kind of book. It's a soft, gentle book that kind of actually reminds me a bit of On the Night You Were Born. It's very similar to that. And there is actually a foreword in this book as well as an afternote. And the foreword and the afternote actually explain a lot more about what this book is based on. This book is actually designed to be a story about the UN Convention for the Rights of the Child. The afterword actually lists some of the articles of that UN Convention of the Rights of the Child so that you can see them for your reference. There's a lot of good information there. But then the foreword talks a little bit about how they based this story on the fact that every child should have certain inalienable rights, like the right to be loved by their family and the right to, not like the rights that kids think they have, like to have candy every day, but normal rights that children should be given, and unfortunately not everyone in the world is. And this is going to be our last entry into the picture book category, easy reader category. I can't recommend this book enough. This book is called Helga Makes a Name for Herself. This is a fantastic book. I actually just read this to my 5-year-old just the other night, and me, my husband, her, we all love this book. I'm probably going to go buy a copy of this book for myself because I love it so much. In this book, Helga is a small but mighty Viking who wants to be a warrior just like her hero, Ingrid the Axe. When she finds out that Ingrid is looking for new recruits, she does everything to try out. It's a very funny picture book. It will have you laughing out loud while also inspiring your little to persevere and follow your dreams. It's very funny. There is actually a little side character that you see throughout of this older gentleman who is very hard of hearing. So you have these little times during your reading that you're able to make funny voices and say different things for this older gentleman. And it's just a great story about how everyone tells Helga she can't be a warrior, she can't do that because that's not her job. And Helga is absolutely determined that she's going to be a brave warrior, and her hero in the end recognizes her as a warrior, gives her a warrior name, and she is able to become a legend herself. One section that a lot of people aren't aware that we have in the youth room is our graphic novel section. And graphic novels are actually something that have become very popular in the past few years for younger readers. They're a great way to introduce reading, to encourage reading, to get someone who may not be the biggest, strongest, or best reader to still pick up a book and read through it. Graphic novels are very, very good for that. And Gabby and Gator is one of our newest selections in our graphic novel section. So in Gabby and Gator, we meet, this is actually the story of an alligator who gets flushed down the toilet as a baby and develops a fear of water because of that. He grows up to 10 years later, he lives in the sewers and he has a taste for poodles. He keeps coming out at night and eating dogs, which of course sticks animal control on him. At the same time, we have Gabby. Gabby is a very, very shy little girl who has a hard time talking to other children. She's got some, it's not specifically mentioned in here, but is a bit of anxiety most likely. She's very shy, she doesn't talk, and she doesn't really have any friends because of that. Gabby eventually runs into the gator. They meet each other and become instant friends. They go on all sorts of adventures. They manage to escape from the animal control person, and this is just the first title in what I think is probably going to be a long series. After our graphic novels, the next logical step would be to step into juvenile fiction. And I know a lot of people, when they think of juvenile fiction, think of these giant, thick books that might be a little overwhelming for someone who is just starting into chapter books. But we also have a selection of what we call early chapter or easy chapter books that are the thinner chapter books. They are still mostly words with only some pictures. They are broken up into chapters, but they're a little bit of a larger font. They're a shorter eventual overall story length, and they are designed to be a little bit of an easier read. So these are a good pick for someone who is trying to graduate from those beginner reader books but isn't quite ready for the longer fiction novels. And this new title that we have in our easy chapter books is called Trouble at Table 5, I Can't Feel My Feet. And this is a series of books, Trouble at Table 5, following this group of friends. This particular book follows them, and it's a creative little story about a group of friends imagining how they can stay warm on their winter walk to school. There are a lot of good pictures in here, very much a comic book style, kind of reminiscent of Diary of a Wimpy Kid or even Captain Underpants. So there's a lot of breaking up of the text with pictures so that your new to chapter books children aren't getting overwhelmed. And this is a fun story that I think everyone can relate to because everyone's had that walk to school where you're just trying to hunch up and get warm and get to school as quick as you can. Next, we're going to dip into our longer chapter books in our juvenile fiction. These are all standard juvenile fiction novels. The first one I'd like to talk about is the brand new Lewis Lowry's Willoughbys Return. So if you have, or if you have not, you should go watch it. It's awesome. If you have seen the smash hit, The Willoughbys, the animated movie that is on Netflix, this is finally the continuation of that story. Set 30 years in the future, this follows Richie Willoughby, who is the son of Timothy Willoughby. After the events of the first book and of the movie, selling candy has suddenly been made illegal, and Richie has to learn how to live in a world without his family's fortune, without sweets, and without really any friends. To make matters worse, the now grandparents Willoughby have thawed out of their mountain top where they were frozen due to climate change, and they are again on their way back. This is hilariously funny, super inviting, super entertaining, and if you have seen that movie on Netflix or read the first book, this is a fantastic sequel to tell you even more about this zany family. Next up in our juvenile fiction series, we have The Last Mirror on the Left. This is actually the second novel in the legendary Alston Boys series and follows cousin detectives Otto and Sheed. They are back at their normal lives after saving their town, but Otto cannot forget what his future self said about Sheed getting sick and is determined to stop it from happening. Without his cousin knowing, he doesn't want him to find out about what his future self said. Fortunately, Miss Nedra of the Rorham Mirror Emporium does remember what happened last summer, even though most of the town doesn't, and provides the perfect distraction as someone has escaped from their mirror prison and she needs the help of the boy detectives to hunt down the escapee and get them back inside the mirror. This is a great book for anyone who enjoys science fiction, who enjoys fantasy, who enjoys brotherhood, and other cousins, but they act a lot more like brothers. This is a fantastic story with great representation and is a highly recommended read. Plus, it has some interesting little illustrations throughout. Occasionally when we get new books in, they aren't technically new books, but they are what we call new to us. And that is the case with our next title here. This is part of the Land of Stories series. This is called the Authors Odyssey. And this, of course, is by well-known children's author Chris Colfer. The Land of Stories series is a fantastic series. If you haven't started it yet or tried it yet, this is right up the alley for Chronicles of Narnia fans, Harry Potter fans, Percy Jackson fans, really anyone who likes reading. This is the 5th book in the Land of Stories series, following twins Alex and Connor, and they have entered a world that has been created by Connor's imagination. In this title, the twins find out that the only place that they can defeat the masked man and his literary army is inside of Connor's own short stories. So this is filled with literary compliments. This is filled with all sorts of different book-based magic, reading-based magic. It actually follows his entire short stories kind of like a journal as well. So you have that feel, even though it's not in first person, you have the feel as if you're reading a story of someone that you know. Stepping away from the fantasy and the fiction, we're going to talk a little bit about a few non-fiction titles for the end of our book look here. And our non-fiction titles come in a variety of difficulty in reading levels. And again, we're going to start off with a simpler one and move into the more complex. So starting off, we do have a new nonfiction title here about water. It's called Water, Why We Drink to Refuel. This is a very simple book designed for younger readers. And it just talks a little bit about not the science behind what water is, but more about how water helps our bodies. Summer coming up quickly, there is never a better time to talk about hydration and why it's so important to drink a lot of water so that we don't dehydrate and what can happen to us if that happens. Getting a little bit more difficult in our nonfiction titles here, we have a new entry into our Community Helpers series. And this is a very poignant, very well-timed book called Who Are the COVID-19 Helpers? Fred Rogers taught us that when things feel scary, we should look for the helpers. 2020 was an interesting and definitely memorable year for all of us, and especially for the kids. This new edition of the Community Helper series talks about some of the essential workers that have helped to protect and serve the community during this unprecedented time. You're going to find everything in here from frontline workers to doctors, nurses, but even things like grocery store workers and things like that. That's just going to give your kids a more age-appropriate idea of who's helping whenever we have unprecedented times like this occur. One fun thing that can happen sometimes with nonfiction titles, not all of them tend to be standard size. Sometimes we get nonfiction titles in that are quite large, as with the case with our next book. This huge book is aptly titled, The History of Everything in 32 Pages. Our universe is billions and billions of years old, and a lot of things that have happened during that time, and mountains of books have been filled covering all of the history that has occurred. This book takes a slightly different approach to that massive timeline and focuses on telling the entire story of everything in only 32 pages. Each 2-page spread covers a particular time period from 4.6 billion years ago to 4000 BCE to 1940s and even present day. The large illustrations and comic-style factoids are just the right size to help keep kids interested without becoming boring. It's also a huge book that helps put the actual age of many creations into perspective. Human beings don't even get mentioned until page 18. Whether you are interested in history or just want to explore the timeline of our universe, this book is sure to be a huge, pun intended, hit. And the last title on our book look today, well, it would be what we consider the most challenging book of all the ones that I've introduced today. That does not mean that it is inappropriate for any particular age group or that you can't just read it to have fun. It is a nonfiction title, and it's something that's a little bit different than anything else that we really had in the youth room up to this point. And this title is called The Modern Art Explorer. Have you ever wanted to visit a modern art display but couldn't afford the travel time or the distance? Maybe you just love the art and would love a way to foster that same love in your kids in an age-appropriate way. Enter The Modern Art Explorer. This nonfiction title is a museum in a book. Filled with interesting factoids about each art installation, this book encourages you to treat each page as if you were seeing it in person. Stare at each art piece. Think about how it makes you feel and what it makes you think. It features 30 unique and famous art creations, and every turn of the page will feel like you're entering a new part of a museum. And it really does. It has these beautiful full-page spreads and photographs of all these different modern art installations so that you can bring this to your children and to your home in a very simple way that's going to make sense to them, that they're going to be able to understand, and also without having to go anywhere. And it features all sorts of different famous artists, from Picasso to Matisse to Kahlo to Warhol to Pollock. And it really is just a huge book full of art. So if you are an art fan or a museum fan or anything like that, this is a great title to read. And that is all that I have for this week's book look. I hope that you enjoyed some of our titles. Don't forget, we do have our downtown Altoona Library location open in the Transit Center. That is, of course, where you can pick up all the trains and buses. All of these titles are available now to check out at that location. So stop on in and see us. Have a fantastic day and keep tuned for our next book look.